I'm extremely happy to welcome Danielle Dank, the Senior Director of the Community Schoolyards Initiative, and Molly Morgan, Parks for People Program Manager from Trust for Public Land, to share their program and their experience with us today. You've read their bios when we shared this session, and we invite you to kind of put your thoughts and questions in the chat at any time while they're presenting or while we're discussing, so that we can have a really interactive and multi-voice discussion. So with that, Danielle and Molly, I will stop sharing and hand things over to you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Justine, and thank you all for making the space to share more about our Community Schoolyards initiative and program in Dallas. My name is Danielle Dank. I'm with the Trust for Public Land. I've been here about 12 years, working nationally, and I'm actually based in the Philadelphia area. So really excited to talk to anybody from Philadelphia, but I'll also be joined by Molly Morgan, who leads our work in Dallas. So we have a presentation today, and I'm just going to share my screen real quickly here. Is that working? Yep. Okay, great. So when we think about adaptation, and when we think about the problems we're all solving, I think it's important to note, well, just really backing up, Trust for Public Land is a national organization. We've been working at the intersection of community health, of climate resilience, of helping to connect people to parks and helping to conserve land so that everybody can benefit from the joys of the outdoors. And we work very strategically through both a level of implementation through our field work and our projects, but then also at systems change level, policy, advocacy. So our toolkit, if you will, kind of expands across the entire spectrum of the implementation and also the planning role. So we have partnerships with many cities around the country. And one of our, I would say, more flourishing programs at the moment is our Community Schoolyards work. Community Schoolyards are really our sort of theory of change, is that every student deserves a beautiful place to play, a place that is relevant to them, and that they should be set up so that they advance activity levels, that they advance health outcomes, that they advance learning outcomes, that they also advance climate resilience, and that they are a place for learning. So to that end, when we look across the country at places where there are gaps, and this image is sort of woefully shows the gaps that exist, we're finding places that are asphalt covered, chain link fence surrounded. They really don't provide an opportunity for joyful play, for recreation. And physical activity levels are lower for students as a result. And mental health outcomes are, at a more alarming rate because they're not connected to the nature. And so this transformation that we see that we've kind of made possible around the country in partnership with schools and students and communities is a viable and a very doable solution that helps to create a space through student design that includes basketball and recreation and places to play, be physically active. It also includes gardening areas, as you can see in this image, and places for the children to really begin to connect a little bit more with nature. This is not the greenest of our sites, but that's okay. We have 300, but that it really does provide that opportunity for mental health, for physical activity, and for increased food access and healthy eating. So those are the kind of health metrics that help sort of drive our work. This image is of a road, which I was going to replace, but it's also what we have around all our schools, right? These places that are hot, that they're asphalt covered, that they're concentrating heat, that they're flooding during downpours, and they really aren't serving the school in the way that they should. I wish this was in a road. But even in this road condition here, you can see that they can be designed in such a way that they are cooling the environment, that they're managing stormwater in a beautiful way, in a nature-filled way. And so whether it's in a road or in a schoolyard, we've been installing green infrastructure in across areas where the need is the greatest. I think that our total number of schoolyard gallons that we've managed over the years is about 70 million gallons of stormwater. So that's 70 million gallons of raw sewage that wouldn't be in some of the disturbed creeks and rivers that surround our communities. And so there's a significant value to greening these spaces. In addition, we've been calculating the amount of captured carbon that by tree planting offsets from the grid, in addition to not just the grid, but even downstream through the green infrastructure. So there's a lot of carbon we can begin to take up and mitigate through this project. When we are thinking about equity, our analysis shows that parks serving communities of color are half the size and 40% more crowded than parks that are in more predominantly white communities. And this is a real equity consideration, so that, you know, there's not as much place for kids just to play. And, you know, these schoolyards do provide an opportunity, as you know, for kids to play. And even if it's asphalt, they can begin to play, but we know that they can be so much better. So when students have a chance to design and make the spaces fit the needs that they have, they begin to have dualities and purpose. During the school hours, they can serve as a gymnasium, as a auditorium, as a, you know, place even for having lunch and certainly play. But then after school hours, they serve as a place for the entire community to come and enjoy. And our analysis has shown that if every single schoolyard was transformed across the country, that we could put 80 million people, additional people, within a 10-minute walk of a park, including 20 million who currently do not have access, which would account for 1/5 of the overall gap in the United States. So this is very, very actionable and would meet a huge need. When we think about the learning perspective, even if a schoolyard is green and maybe even, you know, filled with trees, it often isn't really set up to be a place for learning. And you can see here that there's been some attempts, but really the programming is not happening without the sort of construction that needs to happen. So in Atlanta, the team worked on a design that included just simple pathways and some playgrounds and some destinations and outdoor learning area. And now this whole area is activated for students to enjoy during the school day and for the community after hours. I love this image on the right. This shows a school forest in Vermont. In Vermont, we worked to conserve forested landscapes and forested areas adjacent to schools. So that turns really these amazing forests into learning forests. And, you know, students and teachers are stepping up to take students outside even when it's snowy out. This image is really meant to kind of show what happens when schoolyards aren't considered as a community asset. And, you know, this particular school in Philadelphia is a parking lot, right? And that is not really helping to bring people together in a place where they're needed. It's not really helping to advance community cohesion. In a time of increased loneliness and isolation, we really need to do everything we can with our public spaces. And we worked with the school here in Southwark to turn that parking lot at the school essentially into a vibrant community schoolyard, complete with shade structures and, you know, rain gardens all around the building. And it's now never empty. This place is really serving the 27,000 people that live within a 10-minute walk in a significant way. And you know, when we talk about community cohesion, we need more of this. So thinking about all of these areas, climate, equity, learning, health, and community, this is sort of the Venn diagram of impact that we are moving forward with, that helps inform our work, how we work, where we work, because we know at the intersection of these spaces, we're advancing resilience and justice, empowerment, student achievement, and social capital. And these are all so vital and so important right now. So our work has taken us across the country, starting in the East Coast. We've been, our program in New York City and Newark, New Jersey, are nearly 30 years old. And more recently, in the last 10 to, I guess, 6 years, we began to take that footprint of program development across the country. And so you can see that we are working in 23 states right now, both in urban areas and also in rural areas. We have a pretty robust partnership with the Bureau of Indian Education and with multiple tribal communities for our Tribal Community Schoolyard Program, which is very exciting because the need isn't only an urban need. The need really is for these spaces to serve as many students as possible. So we're thinking strategically about making sure that this prototype is widely implementable. And when it comes to how we work with the community and with the school on these projects, we do have a process that's framed around building the work, but it's also framed around building capacity. Because we want these projects to become the kind of leverage point that brings people together around their new space in a way that catalyzes the health and the climate resilience and the impacts that we're all striving for. We're also looking to break down barriers that have prevented schoolyards from being prioritized by school districts, and the whole handful of inputs that we advance along that continuum. And our goal is to basically transition the entire way community schoolyards are prioritized so that they do become the standard practice. And with that, we have developed some tools that others can use. So if you are able to copy this, I can also put it in the chat. But this is a website that we've developed where anybody can go on and through the lens of mental health, through health, climate, equity, and academics, you can begin to see where schoolyards would be most impactful. Orange dots showing the places of greatest need, purple dots showing a pretty well-met community. And then as you zoom in, you can see at the school district level where there are priorities, and even at this individual school level where there are priorities. So it becomes a really great tool for thinking about adaptation in a kind of an equity and through an equitable lens. So invite you to use that, especially if you're doing any planning work. It's free, and we built that for everyone to take a look at. Our analysis, our input also includes very intentional steps that help build capacity at the community level, including making sure students are, the agents of change, that they are the ones that are dreaming into this space, and driving forward kind of a vision that is theirs. That is built around whatever climate condition impacts their community. So students go through all these different steps. They align with their curriculum, whatever curriculum they're working on. Usually it's a science standard curriculum. There's a lot of alignment. And it's a wonderful process. It takes about a semester, but what we end up with is a more empowered and engaged community and a plan that meets the local needs. And students that are just so thrilled to have this experience. And another important step in our process is stewardship. And what I mean by stewardship is that Trust for Public Land never just builds a schoolyard and walks away. We have relationships that are, 30 years old, where we can go back and help and support our communities through different mechanisms, micro grants and cleanup days and teacher curriculum and teacher trainings. And, we continue to be an advocate for our school districts because we know that this work it takes a village. And so we want to be part of that. I won't go into the details here, but I did mention earlier how the intervention is really just a leverage point in this entire sort of system change approach. There's a lot more detailed information here, but I did want to kind of point out that this work is, it's really important to know that there is a significant body of evidence that underpin the health outcomes, that underpin the learning outcomes, and that, especially when we think about STEM as a priority, there's a lot of the research that shows that these kinds of spaces at school are, and leading to pro-environmental attitudes, that they're leading to improvements in social and emotional development, and a whole host of other pro-social and pro-environmental ways of thinking about the world. So these are really important as we think about our role in helping to cultivate the next generation of environmentalists. And so our theory of change looks at the existing baseline of research through our various inputs that I mentioned earlier, and how we can begin to quantify and further advance the sort of the standard. Because as I mentioned, like the fact that schoolyards aren't being prioritized by all districts, we think we can change that if we have really good research and if it's published so that in a way that is relevant to decision makers. So we're working on evaluation and research that really amplifies the impact. And now I will pass it to Molly.
Hi, everybody. I'm Molly Morgan. I am based in Dallas, and like was mentioned earlier, I'm the Parks and Schoolyards Director for North Texas Trust for Public Land. And I'm delighted to talk to you guys about our version of a schoolyards program in Dallas. And quickly, I was wondering if everyone can write in the chat what city they're based in, so I can get a sense of some of the questions I'm going to ask back to you all. You've got New York, Seattle, Lowell. Oh, Dallas. Hi from SWA. Nice to see you. New York, Brooklyn, Portland. Okay, cool. Well, I first wanted to start by saying that in Texas and Dallas, we're really focused on increasing the 10-minute walk here through a variety of different mechanisms. And schoolyards was a really important way for us to do that and combine the incredible work that the schoolyards team was doing nationally, bring that ethos and program here. And in Dallas, we are on the next slide. I'll show you a map. In Dallas, we're still facing a park equity gap. When I started working here at TPL in 2018, Dallas had 53% park access. So 53% of the city had access to a park within a 10-minute walk of their home. And the reason I asked the question about where you all live is because if any of you have been to a place like Dallas, and some of you live a place like Dallas, when you're in a suburban city, sometimes that 10-minute walk gets harder and harder to reach in the neighborhoods that we serve. We saw a huge opportunity looking at the neighborhood level. Like in my neighborhood, the closest park is a park that is not associated with the schoolyard, and it's a little bit over a 10-minute walk, but I can easily walk to the elementary school in my neighborhood within 10 minutes. They're already in many cases serving as these public spaces, but can use the amenities and improvements to better serve communities. And so, we were challenged in 2019, midway through looking at the feasibility for this program, not just to look at interlocal agreements, but to improve 20 schoolyard sites as quickly as we could to increase that 10-minute walk and provide children the benefit they need in their neighborhoods. We used data from a previous project called Smart Growth for Dallas to prioritize those locations. And we looked at things like urban heat island, park, where was in a park gap, population density, EJ screen criteria, and came up with a list of over 150 parcels of schoolyards and potential library sites and Dallas water utility sites that could be transformed for the better. All of the top sites were schoolyards. And so we started working on how we can make that vision a reality over a 3-year time period. We were generously supported by a foundation who really encouraged us to make these changes for communities as quickly as we could. And so on the next slide, this was a real partnership model here, and that funder really brought us to get two organizations together. Texas Trees Foundation had been doing schoolyards work. They do excellent schoolyard and education work in the schools. And we had been working on the 10-minute walk in parks here in Dallas. And so we brought community engagement, park experience, and the community engagement experience around kind of bringing these two sometimes different groups together, but oftentimes they're not. And we formed a partnership with DISD, Richardson Independent School District, and Park and Recreation. In this model, Texas Trees Foundation managed the construction curriculum and tree planting. We implemented community engagement, park activation, and a community art program at every campus. And so on the next slide, you'll see an example of what this looked like, but also what we were challenged to do. So our challenge was to find a way to deliver 20 schoolyard sites at $350,000 a piece over 3 years. And I'm really excited and proud that we did it. And I'll talk about the impact in a little bit. But again, back to the differences between cities and what individual cities, people, neighborhoods need. The image you see here you know, when we started working on these, the most important thing to the community was actually to preserve what was already there, but make it better. So add a new playground, find a way to cite schoolyard amenities into what was already there, because most of these sites have existing open space that wasn't functioning for the students. It's very hot here, was not designed well, and wasn't providing actually any real benefit to the site. And we were also challenged to do it really fast. And so our goal was to open each individual site on a 12 to 18 month timeline. And so on the next slide, you'll see in more detail what went into each park. Each new park had a at least 6,000 square foot playground. And part of that goes back to not all playgrounds in our current school district meet park standards. Right now, there are different design standards between schoolyards and parks, but also we wanted to provide a playground that provided both social learning, but also nature elements as a part of it. So we used a specific line to encourage that. Each got a new loop trail, park benches, an outdoor learning area. Each site also gets customized tree planting by our partner. And those sites get anywhere from 50 to 200 trees, depending on the need, with a variety of different species that match the local ecology, will provide better cooling, and take these areas that are, yeah, they're green with grass, but they're not cool, right? We need more coverage here. Also, for those of you who aren't in Dallas, the number one reason for absenteeism here is pediatric asthma, which is exacerbated by the urban heat island, by more heat, by more particulate matter in the air, and having more trees in places where children is critical to helping to mitigate that. Each site also got a community art piece, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit how critical that is, but we can't do all this benefit and people not use the spaces. People need to see themselves, their communities in these spaces, and participatory design is critical to that. But it's also critical to find ways to keep encouraging people who you don't touch to feel comfortable in the space after it's built. We did community engagement with every surrounding community, and we formed a Friends of group for every schoolyard. And so the next slide, again, back to community engagement and placemaking, especially when you have a low budget, it's still really key and important to make sure sites are specific to the communities that they serve, and to make people to help people see themselves in the spaces. And every neighborhood that we worked in was really different, and it was really important. It was a really important way to engage people, to give input, to draw, to design, to work with student art on those individual murals that make their site special. We also used it as a personalized give back to every community. So we either recreated the artwork that was outside for the school and gifted it also to community members. We created coloring sheets where we took the colors out of them and used them as kids' activities throughout, which was also really special because a lot of the artwork is very visually, it incorporates lots of student art. And so they could take that to their mom and bring their mom to the park, their parent, their friend, and say, I drew this butterfly, and they could color together, which again, we've built as a really good community building activity. On the next slide, this is the timeline that we use to build these parks. And without getting too technical, we used a design build model. But again, 18 months kicked off engagement and design, and spent really the fall working on those things, and then opened them by the following fall. And so I have a lot of pictures here, and I'm just going to share a few stories about, what these schoolyards look like now, and, their individual components. And again, this schoolyard was a super fun one to work on. And you can see on the left that there's a lot of swings. If you currently work in green space, you know that swings are a challenge to construct, but kids love them. And so the school asked us, There's also a blacktop on the far top left side of the screen. And originally we were thinking maybe the playground should go there, but almost in every community in Texas, they said, we don't care if it's closer to the building. We want the most kids amenities and community amenities that we can have. And so we would write those things on a master plan that that blacktop should be replaced or resurfaced at some point. But again, situated the mural, and the outdoor classroom in places that tied in with the existing landscape to maximize their potential. And again, on the next slide, there's a mural that a artist who lived in the neighborhood took student drawings about being outside and about their experience with outside, and created that mural. And since we were on a very tight budget, we worked with artists to create graphic digital versions that we then printed on a substrate that could be used on the building and is also semi-permanent, so the school can take it down at any time. On the next slide, again, you'll see an example of the playground that we built on the bottom left of the screen is tied in with these existing amenities that are already there. And so in many cases, there isn't enough play equipment. There aren't enough trees, there aren't enough benches on these sites. And so looking at creative ways to maximize what's already happening there. And then on the next slide, you'll see the outdoor classroom for that same campus. And again, we used, where it's hot here in Texas, we're using natural materials. In the outdoor classrooms, we're using limestone benches. We're situating it in a shadier part of the site. One, so that it's more comfortable, but two, because at this classroom in particular, children learn about the difference in air temperature in the sun and the shade. I'm sorry, ground temperature in the sun and the shade. And again, another artist from this neighborhood put together those children's drawings in a piece for that outdoor classroom. On the next slide is again a picture of that outdoor classroom and where it's situated. And on the next slide again is an image of the playground that has a more naturalistic feel to it. It's a Robinia line with wood around kind of the existing spaces. And in this case, you know, there was no place on the building for the mural, and the school district was very happy to have it making a portable a little bit more attractive for the students that are there, and something fun that when they go out to their portable class, they can look at and engage with. Something important to note here too is that on Dallas campuses, most playgrounds have the plastic lip around it that you see around the playground, the swings in the playgrounds. And for us, we don't feel like that is a very good solution to ADA. And so we made sure that every one of our playgrounds had a full concrete curb around it, and in many cases, a full walking path, not here. To have a safer access and an even level surface to that playground. On the next slide, you'll see a totally different playground. This was actually on a middle school and a community space where actually there were adequate play facilities, and the community and the school requested things that children could be outside and their families after school hours and have a safe place to be and hang out and get to know each other better. And so again, an artist worked directly with students in an art class workshop on this, and they came up with this mural together, which was then put on the building. The next slide shows the different kind of encouragement for a little bit older of a child to continue to enjoy being outside with you know, stuff that's a little bit more active. There's also a high school across the street from this campus, and so it was important to find places for the middle school age kids to be, but on the weekends to really serve both, because they're both going to be using the site, and being outside is beneficial to both groups. And so the playground was designed specifically for that here. On the next slide, you can again see the kind of more naturalistic playground pieces with the wood treated slide. And again, that's the mural that I showed earlier. And then on the next slide, this again shows the kind of creative thinking sometimes to work with an existing space. But this is a playground that is near and dear to my heart that I worked on closely. But again, the community here said we don't want to pay the money to get rid of the backstop, where in the smaller circle on the right side of the image, we would prefer that be the backdrop for the outdoor classroom. And so we got to work through the design there. Again, you can see those benches, and I can't tell you how much kids love that giant hill. And then on the next slide, you can see the mural again. This mural incorporates elements of kids drawing throughout the bird characters and throughout the little kind of motifs throughout, but an artist that grew up in the neighborhood and felt very passionate about the connectivity to family through this mostly Latinx neighborhood, and donated this piece to the site, again highlighting how important it is to be culturally and contextually sensitive, and that, you know, creating places that people feel safe and comfortable in is critical to them using them. And this is one of our most used schoolyard sites. So finally, I'm going to talk briefly about outcomes, but through this project, we opened 20 schoolyards. It says 6 more, but I'm sorry, we opened all 20 by 2022. Believe it or not, 230,000 people live within a 10-minute walk of these schoolyards that didn't have access to a park before, which is a huge number. And in an area where we are really looking at access, created a huge jump in the park access in our city. And so on the next slide, you also see that these kind of sites, for all the benefits they're providing, are relatively affordable from a maintenance standpoint because of the shared uses, because of the types of amenities that are selected to be here. The annual maintenance for the city is $10,000. And we were able to do all of this with a $7 million philanthropic gift for 20 schoolyards. And I have other park projects that have a $7 million budget for one park. And so what an incredible way to make impact in our neighborhoods quickly and affordably. And on the last slide, I said, you know, when I started, we started also looking at schoolyard sites that didn't need as many improvements. There were 53 that we looked at, and that eventually went into an interlocal agreement. These 20 really needed those improvements. With that entire agreement, over 250,000 people gained access, and it helped Dallas grow from 60% park access to 73%, which is an almost unheard of jump in the amount of people served over a 3-year time. And on my last slide, I just wanted to share a quick story about this mural, because it's another project that was near and dear to my heart. But this school was impacted by a tornado several years ago that actually took the roof and a wall off of their gym, and children were at the school when that happened. And so they were afraid to go outside in many cases. And it was something the school was working on, was having more fun activities outside, because every time there's any kind of weather event here, these are elementary school kids, were, you know, afraid of being outside. And something also really important to this mural was the representation of people of all abilities and all the different dynamic diversity in this community. Unfortunately, this mural is dedicated to a community member who ended up passing away during COVID, and she's depicted in the wheelchair in the middle, but she was a part of the PTA. She was an extremely involved community member. And when we ended up putting all the pieces, for the mural together, it was something that the kids and the community there were immediately drawn to and could see themselves in, but could also see somebody that they loved in, and continued on that mission of encouraging students to get outside more frequently so they could enjoy the benefits of the things we're talking about here. And so that's my last slide. I am super proud of the work we've done. I agree, somebody said it's hot. That's a different iteration of things that we're working on here in Texas too.